Hello and welcome to, let me turn on the captioning. Hello and welcome to the second No Experience Required. This is a beginner-friendly coding stream. So whether you have never written a line of code before or you are a more experienced developer, in this coding stream we will be covering the absolute basics of JavaScript, and then we will build a video conferencing application using our newly found knowledge. I want to say hi to people who have already tuned in. Thank you for joining us. So, as I said, we're going to start by doing a little bit of a JavaScript primer. Last week I said it would take 10 to 15 minutes, and 45 minutes on I was still nattering on with it. So I've actually pre-recorded that segment. It comes in at exactly 20 minutes. So if you already feel like you have a good grounding in JavaScript, I would encourage you to stick through and watch it. But if you don't want to go through that primer, it will take 20 minutes. I'll give you a heads up just before I start it. You can go make yourself a cup of tea, go get some fresh air in an appropriate socially distancing fashion, set a 20-minute timer and come back. But there are a few things you're going to need for this workshop. I'm going to show you what they are now. So while you're watching the primer, you might consider going and downloading them and making sure that you're set. So the first thing you're going to need is a Vonage Video API account. There's a free trial on it, so you don't need a coupon code or anything. And the URL is up here in this box. So if you go to Tokbox, tokbox.com/developer, you can sign up for an account there. You don't need to do anything with the account for now. I'll show you how to get everything set up after the JavaScript primer. You're also going to need to have installed Node.js, so you can go to nodejs.org and download this and make sure this is already installed on your system. At a point in the workshop, we're also going to be testing an API that we're building. So to do that, we're going to use Postman. So you can go to postman.com and download that. Strictly speaking, you don't really need Postman to complete this workshop, but it provides a nice visual interface for testing APIs, and I think that's going to be quite useful, so I encourage you to go and download that. And finally, you're going to need a code editor. Again, strictly speaking, you don't need a code editor. You could use Notepad or you could use TextEdit, but code editors are more aware of your code and they make it a lot easier to work with. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, which is free and built on open source. Let me make that a bit bigger here. You can go to code.visualstudio.com and go grab that. You might also have a code editor that you are happy using that isn't Visual Studio Code. By all means, use what you're happy with. But if you don't know where to start, this would be the one that I recommend for now. So hopefully this pre-recorded segment bit's going to work out. I haven't quite got the captionings worked out for when that part's going. I'll have that sorted for next time. I'm going to be in the chat monitoring things. If you have questions, by all means, pop them in the chat. And for those of you who aren't going to join us for the JavaScript primer, consider this your 20-minute warning. You know what? Okay, Google, set a 20-minute timer. I helped you out there. Okay, I'm back. We're officially going to call the pre-recorded JavaScript primer a bust, and I will try and figure it out for next time. In the meantime, let's go through a little JavaScript primer. It might now take a little bit more than 20 minutes. If you're still with us and you're still in the chat, give me something back. Tell me that you are now hearing me speak and you can see my screen. That would make me very happy, just so I know everything is now working. So I'm just going to crack on, assuming everything is good, and I'm sure you'll tell me if it isn't. I can see it, but there is no audio and it is not moving. You got nothing. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you see or hear me? Because hopefully at this point, you can hear/see me. Don't know. All right, still with me. Boom, you hear me. This is good. All right. So I'm going to give you the JavaScript primer now. 20 minutes, give or take, probably more now. I'm going to just try and give you a rundown of the language. In order to do this, just to make sure I cover everything, I'm just going to pull up the notes that I had when I created the recording, because the worst thing would be for me to miss something really important. We get on a little bit later and realize we've missed something quite important. So, firstly, what actually is JavaScript? JavaScript is a programming language. It runs in your browser. It also runs on servers where it's called Node.js. We write instructions known as statements. That is me in a black t-shirt. We write instructions known as statements to be run or executed by the computer. Every one of these statements is separated by a semicolon. Statements comprise of a number of parts. There are a few parts, but the most common parts are keywords that say which type of statement we are going to write, values, expressions, keywords, comments, and there is one more, and operators. And we'll go through some of these in this little primer here. So keywords, as I said, identify what type of statement we're going to write, and values in JavaScript can be one of a number of types. So in this little primer, I'm going to introduce you to some common keywords and also some common data types in JavaScript. We'll learn a little bit around how they work and how we can build a program with them. So firstly, let's talk about variables. In JavaScript, variables are used to store values with a keyword, and as you might guess from the fact they're called variables, the content of them is variable. We can change the value against the keyword. In order to create a variable in JavaScript, we're going to use a keyword called const. I am going to bump the font size a little. There we are. We're going to use a keyword called const, then a space, and then we provide the name of the variable. In this case, I'm going to provide the name pets. An equal sign is an operator. It's called an assignment operator. And we are going to make the value of the variable pets 1, and then that semicolon. So now pets is equal to 1. Now, when we want things to appear as an output on our console, which is what this bit over here on the right is called, we have to use a special phrase called console.log. Someone's asked, why use a semicolon when they are no longer required? In some contexts, they are required, and I think it's good practice to still use them, especially when you're starting out. When you get a little bit more confident and you're aware of where the quirks are, then by all means, write more succinct code. In this little primer, I'm not focusing on writing succinct code. I'm focusing on making sure people understand the key concepts of the language. But you're right, in some cases, these semicolons are not required anymore. You'll be seeing me write them in this primer though. So inside of these brackets, console.log, we put the value of what we want to be logged to the console, what we want to be printed to the console. So if I put pets in here and hit play, we'll see that the output is 1 because pets has a value of 1. It is equivalent to writing 1. Now let's say we have another pet, which I'm thinking about doing at the moment. We can reassign the value of this variable by writing the name of the variable equals, you can hear the first pet, that's the reason why we haven't got a second, and we're going to reassign it to 2. Hit play. And what you'll see is there is actually an error. And if we scroll up, it does say what the error is. It's an assignment to a constant variable. And that's because this keyword const can be used to create a variable, but it's a variable that will not change value. So we cannot reassign the value of a variable that was initialized with a const keyword. Instead, in these contexts, there is a let keyword. So if I do this and then console.log pets, hit play, we'll now see that the value is 2. And that is because we can reassign the value of a variable initialized with let. We're not going to go into the difference, but kind of old JavaScript didn't have constant let, it just had a keyword called var. There are some differences between var and let and const. We're not going to use let. We're going to always use const. Unless we know that the value is going to change, then we'll use let. We're not going to use var. But if you're looking at someone else's JavaScript and wondering what this keyword means, this is also a variable declaration that can change. So I'm going to change that to let, back to let. I don't like looking at vars. We've already used our first data type in JavaScript, and it's this. This is a number. In some programming languages, whole numbers and numbers with a decimal point are treated separately, but in JavaScript they are both just called numbers. And being numbers, we can perform some arithmetic on them using arithmetic operators. So I could do 2 times 5. We'll see that the value is 10. We can also do division, addition, subtraction. And there are some others, but in most cases, you'll probably just be using these 4 more common operators. Right, let's move on. So next we're going to talk about strings. Strings is another data type. I'm going to leave this be, and we're going to just do our work under it, so you can refer back to it during this workshop. Next, as I said, are going to be strings. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it name. And the value of this is going to be my name, Kevin. So as you noticed, I put some quotes around this value, and that denotes this as a string. A string is just a series of characters put together, generally used for text, but where a data type is not one of the other common basic data types, it will generally be a string. You can also use double quotes, and you can use backticks. All that matters is you're using the same quote type on both sides of your desired string. So that is a string. We can also add strings together. So I could add to this my last name, and don't forget to console log it. I'm going to look at what that error is now. What have I done wrong here? I don't think I have. Let's hit play. See if it has a hissy fit. Nope, seems good. There we are. Kevin Lewis. You'll notice there's no space. That's because spaces aren't part of this string. We are just adding the value of one to the other directly, and the result is a new string. You can also add numbers to strings, and it converts all of it to a string, but we won't get into that for now. Next, let's talk about objects. So in some cases, you want to group properties together because they have a purpose where they are all together. Oh, and I've just noticed my captions. Sorry about that, folks. That was in my flurry to get my JavaScript notes up to make sure I cover everything. I accidentally covered that. Apologies. So when we are trying to group values together, we could just create a set of variables, give them similar names, but this isn't very clean. And in fact, JavaScript and most programming languages have a construct that allows us to work together with this. So I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call it pet, singular, and we are going to use this to group some properties together around my pet. In order to create an object, we create 2 squiggly brackets like so, and inside of these squiggly brackets we are going to create some property or key value pairs. Let's just see how it looks, then we'll talk through it. So the first property is I'm going to give him a what am I going to do? I'm going to say his eye color. So he has brown eyes. We're going to do breed. He's a Jack. His age is 3. Strictly speaking, I think his age is more like 3.5 because remember, numbers can also have decimal points. And objects can also have other objects as properties. So if I create a value called names, this itself can be a property with its own key value pairs. We're not going to do this for now. I'm just going to give him a single name, Moo. So this is our object created. Now let's talk about how we actually get the values. Let's start by just console logging the value of pet. We'll see that this whole object has been printed. And if I want a single value, there are 2 main ways to do this. The first is using the dot notation. So you put the name of the object, which in this case is pet, dot, and then the name of the property. So if I go pet.age, now I only get the single value. Another way of doing this is using square bracket notation. So we do square brackets, and then as a string, we pass in the name of a property. So here I could put name. We can hit play, and there is my pet's name. And because in this syntax, we just have to pass a string in, that string could also be a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called property, doesn't really matter what I call it, and I'm going to call this I. And then in here, I can write in property, and property is a string called I. So that should still work. So that's a number of ways of how to work with objects in JavaScript. Next, let's talk about creating lists of data. There are multiple ways to do this in JavaScript. The most common is to create what is known as an array. What's mostly important around arrays is every item in it has a position. It's an ordered list. And while you can shift items around, if you don't do anything, their order will stay the same. So if I create a new variable called fruits, to create an array, we use square brackets. We can put any values we want in this square brackets as long as they're separated by commas. I'm just going to use strings, but this could be a mix of strings and numbers and objects, though generally we keep them the same type, though that isn't enforced. So we have an apple, we have an orange, we have a banana. If I console.log fruits and hit play, you'll see that this array has printed. Now, if I want to get a single item in this array, I again can use square brackets, but in here I put a number denoting the position of the item in the array. So let's put a 1 in here and hit play. And it's printed orange. Now what you might expect is it was going to go and get apple, because apple is the first item. But arrays in JavaScript and in most programming languages are what is known as zero indexed. And this means that the first item in the array is at position 0. This might feel a bit weird, but it's something that you get muscle memory for quite quickly. So if I go for fruit 0, that actually returns the first value. And being an ordered list, we can go through this list and do and run code for every single item in that list. I'm going to show you how this works and then we can discuss it. In order to create a loop, which we will use to go through every item in the fruits array, we use the keyword for. Then we do some rounded brackets. There are multiple ways to write these loops in JavaScript. I'm going to show you my favorite way. However, know that there are a few more if you want to explore that, or you see the word for, know it's probably a loop. You might need to just search that specific type of loop. To create a loop in my favorite way, we're going to create a for of loop. Firstly, we write the word let, and then we write a, generally it's the singular version of the name of the array where the array is plural, but this could be anything. It could just be a single letter or character or whatever you fancy. But I'm going to call it fruit. Then the word of, and then the name of the array, fruits. Now inside of this code block here, we can use the word fruit as a variable only inside of this code block. And the value of it will be that item in the array for every time we're looping through it. While that might be confusing, I'm just going to give you an example. So I'm going to console log. Firstly, I'm just going to console log the word hi and hit play. And you'll notice that hi has printed 3 times because there are 3 items in the array. You can also use the value of fruit. And you'll see that on the first loop of that array, the value was apple. On the second, it was orange. And on the third, it was banana. So fruit you can think of as a variable which you can use within this code block between these 2 squiggly brackets. The final data type we're going to go through in this primer is known as a Boolean. Some people call it a Boolean, but I think it is a Boolean. You can call it whatever you want. I don't really care. Booleans only ever have the value of true or false. You can think of it as a yes, a no, a 1 or 0, but in programming terms, we will use the keywords, all lowercase in JavaScript, true or false. So I'm going to create a new variable called onGuestList. And the value of that will be false because I almost never find myself on any kind of guest list I want to be on. Oh, that's my 20-minute timer. Stop. Hello, people joining us after 20 minutes. It broke. I'm still doing it. You're welcome to stay. Probably be another 10 minutes. Soz. Right, so I've created this variable called onGuest. I didn't think that it would also set one here, even though of course it would. I have one right here. Anyway, we've created this variable called onGuestList. The value is false. Notice it does not have strings around it. There's no fancy formatting. We just write the word true or false. Now that we have a variable that has that value, we can do what is known as a conditional. We can check if a value is truthy or falsy, and I'll talk about truthy or falsy in just a moment. To do this, we use the keyword if and then some rounded brackets, and then the values inside of this rounded bracket has to be either truthy or falsy. If I type in onGuestList and then do these squiggly brackets and console log in here, welcome in, and hit play, this code will only run if onGuestList has a truthy value. That's not the case, so it didn't print. If I change it for true and hit play, you can see we are welcomed in. Being an if statement, we can also write a version of our code that will run when this condition is not satisfied, is not met, is not true. We can do this using the else keyword and then another code block. Now if we hit play, it should say welcome in again. We move it back to false, and we see it says go away because we are not on the guest list. Quite rude, if I may say so myself. There are other ways to get true or false values in JavaScript, and that's using what are known as comparisons. There are a number of comparisons. I'm going to show you a common couple, and hopefully this will ring some bells back from math class back in early schooling. So inside of this if statement here, we can check values against each other. For example, I can check if the value of pets is equal to 1. You'll notice I use 2 equals here, and that's because when we're doing comparisons, we use 2 equals, sometimes 3, but 2 in most cases. And when we are assigning, we'll only use 1. So if I hit play here, we should see go away. That's because pets is equal to 2. If we change this for 2, that is now a, oh, hang on, how many pets do we have? 2 minus 5, gosh, I forgot I did that. Minus 3, because obviously you can have minus 3 pets. There you are, welcome in, because that is now true. You can also do things like, is pets greater than minus 3? Is it greater than or equal to? And there are other comparisons we can do as well. What matters is the value of this is a truthy or falsy value. Now you've noticed I keep saying truthy or falsy and not necessarily true or false. And that's because every value in JavaScript is truthy apart from 0, the number 0, an empty string, the word false. Obviously, we've seen that one. There's also not a number, undefined, and null. We won't be doing much with those today. Undefined we will, but we'll cover that later. If it's not one of these values, the value is truthy, even if it is not explicitly a Boolean value called true. This will be important later in this particular workshop. All right, we're almost at the end now, but I want to show you how we can group lines of code together into nice reusable chunks, and we call them in programming functions. To create a new function, we start with the keyword function, and then we provide a name to reference this function. So I'm going to call this one make cheese sandwich. Let's type it correctly. And some rounded brackets. Then 2 squiggly brackets. And we'll talk about what these do in just a moment. In here we can put any number of steps. They can be arithmetic, we can do a whole bunch here. Right now I'm going to be really boring and I'm going to create 3 console log statements. So firstly I'm going to console log get a slice of brown bread. Next we are going to put down a slice of cheese. And then finally, we're going to put down another slice of brown bread. We are obviously ignoring steps. I'm not sure if you've ever seen those like school workshops where the teacher is a robot and the kids have to like give them instructions, and if you're not super specific, it goes wrong. we're going to pretend that doesn't exist, and this is all we need to tell someone in order to create a cheese sandwich. Now we've defined it, we can use it. We can use it by just referencing the name and doing the parentheses. Doing the rounded brackets. If we hit plus, we see that these 3 steps are run, and we can run this several times if we want, and we run that block of code several times. There are ways to make functions more flexible though, and that's by utilizing these rounded brackets. Inside of it, we can put what are known as options, parameters, arguments. I was not expecting to see put down a slice of cheese in the captions when I joined. You know, if that's when you joined, then I think you missed the real fun, Michael. We can put arguments in here, options, parameters. Unfortunately, you'll probably see me flipping between the different words, but they all mean the same thing in this context. So let's say we are going to provide an argument called filling. And in fact, this is no longer just going to be a function that makes cheese sandwiches. It's a function that will just make sandwiches more generally. Now, the word filling is essentially a variable that we can use inside of this code block. So I could say put down some, and then I'm going to add filling to it. Because remember, we can add strings together. Hit play, we'll see there's some errors. And that's because, we didn't update the name of this function, first of all. It still says make cheese sandwich. And secondly, we actually need to provide provide some data that will be equal to filling. So this one will be a cheese sandwich, and the next one will be a, egg sandwich. Hit play, and we'll see that now these, we didn't add a space in there, but these functions do very slightly different things. Functions can, while having the same base of code. Now, we can also provide multiple arguments, and they just have to be comma separated inside of these brackets. So we might also say bread to denote what type of bread we want to put down. Now we just pass in a second argument. So this one will be some brown bread. This one will be some white bread. And now we can use the word bread inside of our function. So we can add bread to the middle of this sentence, and I'll just do it for the top one in the interest of time, but we'll see that now this says brown bread and this second one says white bread. What's important to note is the order of these parameters have to be the order that they are provided when you call the function. You can use them in any order you want. So as you can see, I've used bread first and filling second, but I've had to provide them in this order. Otherwise, we would be putting down some brown and getting a slice of cheese bread, which is not what we want. Finally, I want to talk to you about scope. This will just be a very quick thing just to be aware of. Certain variables here are accessible throughout our entire application. For example, name, pet, property, they can all be accessed here. They can be accessed inside of the if statement, they can be accessed inside of the function, and that's because they have global scope, because they are defined at the very firstly at the top of our application, because they used const, they have to be defined before they're used, but also because they are not defined within a code block with the squiggly brackets. Let's see what I mean by this. If I create a variable here called, what am I going to call this? Greeting. And I just call it hello. I can use this variable inside of this console log. We'll see that that should be fine. Hello, there we are. But if I go and try and use that variable outside of this function, there will be an error. There will be an error. Greeting is not defined. And that's because this variable is scoped to this code block. This is quite important. We'll use it in the workshop. I just wanted to make you aware. Scope is something that trips people up when they are starting to write code. Yeah, just be aware of that. So that concludes our whirlwind tour. I think I got it in decent time, bearing in mind that my 20-minute pre-recorded segment failed on us. Don't worry if you didn't play along with that. I just wanted to kind of show you these concepts that as you see them when we write code, you're more familiar with them. I will recap them as we use them in our workshop, but now you hopefully have seen them at least once before. Welcome to those of you just joining us. That was a basic JavaScript primer. It was not part of the main workshop, which is to build a video conferencing application, but instead an exercise intended to kind of show people the basics of the JavaScript language. If you haven't already, please do go and get a Vonage Video API account. The URL is above me. That is tokbox.com/developer. You can sign up for a free account there. I'm also going to give you a couple more minutes to go and download Node.js. They have some nice installers here that you can use. Postman, though someone in the chat told me about something that doesn't require a login. I think they said it was called Insomnia. Very nice. Very nice. I'm not going to use it today because I've not used it before. I don't think that's sensible, but I will check this out. I also recently saw postwoman.io, which is browser based. There was one issue I had with it, like a bug, which stopped me being able to use it for this workshop. But just be aware, in most cases, this seems really good and doesn't require you to install anything. In fact, when we get to the point of using Postman, I might try Postwoman first, see if it works, and if not, we'll use Postman. But go grab it anyway, because it takes a couple of minutes to download. You'll also need a code editor. You can use any code editor you want. You want to use Atom? Go for it. You want to use Sublime Text? Go for it. You want to use Vim or Emacs? You have fun with that. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. Here it is. You can go download this if you don't know where to start. You don't really care. I would probably just go and use this one. And then your interface will also look the same as mine. So, with all of that in mind. By the way, are people still with me? Are you still there? Give me a little wave in the chat. We had some technical issues a little earlier. Would just be good to know everything's still working broadly. Also, an interesting point, because this came up in the chat. So someone asked why use semicolons when they're no longer required. My response was, one, in some cases they are required and it will trip you up if you leave them. However, hello Amy, thank you for saying hello. It lets me know you're still there. But yes, actually, a fantastic response in the chat is, I always see semicolons as an industry standard for readability, to which I would absolutely agree. Okay, I'm just going to assume everything is okay, and I'm going to move on through the workshop now. Before we really get started, I want to talk to you a little bit around what I will call the OpenTalk Vonage Video API flow. I thought I might have to create a few diagrams to explain this, and then I went to this page and they were already there and nicely animated too. So you can go to, you know what, I'm actually just going to pop this in the chat. topbox.com/developer/guides/basics. I'm going to go through kind of the diagrams and kind of narrate them for you so you understand what we're going to have to build in order to make this work. So there's this diagram here. It looks like there's quite a lot going on, but I think it is nicely kind of broken down into steps. So there are a few parts we're going to need. The first thing we're going to need is an application server, and that server connects to the OpenTalk cloud. It creates new sessions, and you can think of a session as any given video chat lobby that everyone can be part of. So it can create new sessions. So that's the first step. Then a session is created by your app server. Yes. The next thing, the client. And so the client is going to be your web browser or your mobile phone or your friend's browser or your friend's phone. So these are individual participants trying to join the chat. It will go to your application server. And it will get a session ID so it knows what session it's going to join. Strictly speaking, you could send that to your friend just as a set of characters as a string and send that to them, but that's no fun and it's not great user experience. So the app server is going to work to take a nice name of a room, a friendly name, and provide its associated session ID. And what it's also going to do, the app server, is create a one-use token. Again, strictly speaking, I don't think they're one use. I think they just have a time period placed on them. But what our application will do is it will create a new token every time this our application server has data requested from it. And that token is used for authentication. So those individual browsers and phones can connect to our session. There's other information provided in that token, such as what permissions does this user have? Can they just watch a stream? Can they also publish their own video? It's known as publishing and subscribing. So do they just subscribe and watch like you are now? You're subscribing or watching this video stream, but I can't see your video. Are they also able to publish their own video? This is the most traditional kind of video conferencing application you would think of. So you can all turn on your video or turn on your mic. And then there's also a role which we're not going to use today called a moderator. And a moderator can force one of the clients, one of the browsers or one of the phones to disconnect. Just know that's there. We're not going to use it today. So once the client has a session ID, a token, and also our Vonage Video API key, so our application server is going to need to provide these three pieces of information, then it can use it to directly connect to the OpenTalk Cloud session. So our application server, just to recap, will, let's look at the big diagram. So our application server will 1, create new sessions, 2, connect to clients and dole out information about those sessions and access tokens, and then the clients will connect to the OpenTalk Cloud. So it's kind of a three-step program that we need to kind of think of this as. The other thing to bear in mind is what happens once new people join the stream. Once we are connected to a OpenTalk session, when a new person joins the stream, we get what is known as an event that happens, something that our client is told about, saying there is a new stream that has been connected to this session, and then we're going to go grab that video and show it on the screen. So every time someone joins, we'll show them on the screen as well. And I think they are the main points. We will refer back to this diagram a couple more times. I am just going to repeat it once more because these concepts, they did take me a moment to understand. So we're going to build an application server. That's going to be where we start. That application server is going to create sessions and provide a way for our clients, our browsers, our phones, to get the session ID, the token, and the API key. And then our clients are going to connect to the OpenTalk Cloud and also show new video streams where new people connect. So hopefully you've gone and created a Vonage Video API account now. The account will look something like this, and this is what I want you to go to. I want you to go to projects. I want you to click create new project. You're given a couple of options. We're going to create a new OpenTalk API project, so we can create a custom project. You can call it anything you want. I'm going to call it no XP required. I would just leave the preferred codec as is, and then you're going to hit create. And what that will do is give you two pieces of information. It's going to give you an API key and an API secret. What I'm going to ask you to do once that comes up is just leave that pane up, or you can go grab them later. I'm going to hide that from you because I don't want you seeing my API key and secret. And I'm going to generate mine in just a moment. I'm going to show you the next step once we've done that. So I have created a new folder on my computer. It's completely empty. It's called Video API Stream because that's what we're doing here. And I've opened that in this code editor. I would encourage you to do the same. Create a folder, open the folder in your code editor, and as you can see, there is nothing in it. It is an empty folder. I want you to create a new file and call it .env. This is where we're going to put pieces of data that we don't want to share with other people. And in this case, that's going to be your API key and your API secret. So you can type in the word API key. You can do it however you want. I separate words with underscores. You just can't put spaces. So just know that. So API key equals, and then we're going to put the value in there. I haven't got mine yet. And we're also going to create one called API secret equals. And again, you're going to put your value in there. Now I'm going to go back to the browser. I'm going to hide my screen in a moment, hit create, grab those two keys, put them in the .m file, and then shut the .m file. And that means you can't see it. Someone's just asked, to create a new project, should you use video chat or OpenTalk API? OpenTalk API. So if you're in this view, talkbox.com/account, go to projects. At the bottom of that drop down, it says create new project. And then you're given a choice between video chat embed and OpenTalk API. I want you to click API, then you will be with us here. So you put in any project name you want, leave the selected preferred codec as is, and then hit create. This is the point where I'm just going to put up this little secret screen here that allows me to hit create and grab my keys without you seeing what they are. As a note, you shouldn't be sharing these with other people, just as a heads up. If you are going to be using Git or GitHub, you want to make sure this .m file is not included in the repository. And in fact, while we've got some time, I just want to show you how to do that. So I've now added those values to my .m file. So we're not going to be opening that again together, but know that they're in there. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call that file .git ignore. This is not a Git workshop, and we're actually not going to use Git, but I'm going to show you this file so you know how to make sure that .m file doesn't get published online on GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever it is that you use. Essentially, in this .git ignore file, you just put names of files or folders. So .env, hit save, and close the file. That's all you need to care about. Now, if and when this becomes a Git repository, the .m file doesn't get committed, just to be aware. So that's very good practice. Next, we are going to create, is everyone with me, by the way? Seema, are you good? I'll continue once you tell me you're good. I'll give you time to do that. I know there was quite a lot of fiddling around there, grabbing keys and popping them in a file. So I just want to make sure everyone's good. I think everything's good. Hope everything's good. Yeah, wicked. All right. Sorry for that complete silence. Normally I'm more talkative, but there we go. All right. Next, we are going to create a basic Express.js application. So there are a few steps to do this. Firstly, we're going to need a way to install dependencies into our project. To do that, we're going to need a file called package.json. So if you open a terminal on your computer, that terminal can be separate. Oh, Seema, yes, I know there's a delay, 10 to 15 seconds, I think. But I wanted to make sure before I continued that we were all good. This could be a separate terminal. You can use just the Mac terminal. Visual Studio Code has one built in, so I'm just going to be using that one, but you can use any terminal. We're going to type in npm space init to initialize, space, and then -y and hit enter. And that will create a new file called package.json, like so. That is the contents of it there. Now that we have this, we can install some packages from npm. So npm, Node Package Manager, is a place online where developers can package up their code. And oh, Doggo wants to be a co-host. They package up their code and they make it available. It's kind of like a directory of code, and you don't need to share all of that code every time you are building a project that uses it. Instead, you add it to package.json, and then you just share your package.json, and then other people know what to install. Your computer can tell what to install based on the items that are in package.json. So we can type in npm install, And then we can provide some package names, space separated. So we are going to install one called .env, D-O-T-E-N-V. And .env will actually let us load values from that .env file in our application. Oh, Doggo really wants to be a co-host. You know what? Let's do it. He's very determined. You gonna come then? Yeah? Come on then. Oh. Getting all fussy on us. Right. Essentially, you've signed up to build a video conferencing application, right? So you're here till we're done now. Yeah? So we're going to install .env, which allows us to load. I've realized I only have one hand to type now. Next, space. We are going, someone asked what goes in the .env file. So you know what I'm going to do? I am going to pop the dog down actually. I am going to create a new file just here. I'm going to show you what should go in your .env file. But I'm not going to show you my .env file because it has values in it. So I've created two values. One is called API key equals, and then the value is, you know, your key, and you get that from the OpenTalk dashboard. I also created one called API secret, and that's your secret, again from the dashboard. So that's how it should be formatted, API key and API secret, and that should be a .env file. So let's go back to installing some dependencies. So we need to install .env. Next, we're going to install Express, which is a web application framework in JavaScript. And finally, we are going to install the OpenTalk client. It will make it a lot easier to work with. So we'll go ahead and install those. And as they install, I'm going to show you in package.json. It is updated, or it will be in just a moment. Here we are, as dependencies. So you could also add the node modules to your Git Ignore. It isn't required. This file explains what needs to be installed. And if someone has this file and they type in npm install, it will automatically go and install all of the dependencies which are inside of package.json. Okay. Yes, brilliant. I love people helping each other out. So that's all of the setup we needed to do. Let's get to writing some code. So I'm going to create a new file. You can call it anything you want. I'm going to call mine index.js. Generally, the convention is index or server.js, but I'm going to call it this. The first line we're going to write will actually load in those environment variables, so we have them available later on when we need them. To do this, we type in the word require. And when we type require, the value is a string equal to the package name that we've installed. So we're going to use .env. And then after that, we just type in .config and then some more rounded brackets. So this one line gets everything from the .env file and it makes it available in an object called process.env. So process.env.api key is equal to the value of API key in the .env file. We'll be using it in a little bit. Next, we are going to create a new Express application. So we are going to create a new variable called app, and the value of that will be require Express. And then we're going to immediately initialize it. So we're just going to put two more rounded brackets after it and put a semicolon at the end like so. I'm not sure if this color theme's that good for visibility. It has this yellow right here. I'm not sure against the cream. I'm not sure how readable that is. Let me know, chat, what you think of this theme. I can quite easily change it for something where you can see all of these rounded brackets a little easier. I'll leave it as is unless you tell me it's a little hard to see, in which case I will go ahead and change that. Now that we have initialized an Express application, we can run it on a specific port. So we can go app, one more time, Kevin, app.listen, and the value, the first argument will be a port number. Generally, we do 3000, but it can be any available port within a certain range. I can't remember what it is. Oh, someone says hard to see. All right, let's Let's do this live then. Color theme. How's that? Much better, I think. Again, tell me if that is no good, but I feel like we can see every character a little better now. So the first argument is a port number, and then the second argument is a function. This is known as a callback. This will run once the application is listening on port 3000, and I'm just going to console.log everything is going well. There we are. We're going to hit save. We're just going to check that's working. We're going to go to our terminal. We're going to type in the word node, space, and then the name of the file. We are in the right folder. We're in the folder with this file in, so we can just type in index.js, hit enter, and we see everything is going well. That means our port is, that means our application is running on port 3000. Before we start writing the server code required to send the API key, the session ID, and the token to the front end, the client, the bit that the user will actually see and interact with, let's actually build those pages and make sure that we can access them from our browser. To do this, we're going to write a little bit of HTML. I'm going to keep it as minimal as possible. I'm not going to go through the HTML too much, but hopefully with the small amount I'm writing, it should be okay. If you are getting lost as a result, tell me in the chat. I'll be happy to kind of take a step back. So I'm going to create a new folder called views. And inside that folder, I'm going to create two files. The first file I'm going to call, what shall I call it? Index.html, which is kind of the convention for your main page. And the other file I'm going to create is session.html. So let's start in index. I'm going to create an HTML tag. See, I think this theme has exactly the same issue, but HTML, like, it's now dark on dark. You know, tell me if you want me to change it. We can just cycle through every theme I have installed for the next hour. Inside of HTML, we have a head, which we're not going to bother with, but we should provide, and we have a body. The body is going to contain an H1 that says enter session. So this is going to be like our landing page where we put the name of a session in. We're going to create a form. We don't need an action because we're going to access it using JavaScript. And we are going to give this, so we need some way to identify what it is. We're going to use an ID, and I'll call it registration. Doesn't really matter what we call it. Registration. Yes, you can spell. Well done. In here, we are going to put just a label called name. The value will be name, and we'll put an input and the ID of name. And then finally, we are going to need like a submit button. So we can create an input with a type of submit. So we've created this very basic, form on a page. That's all we're going to write for now. Now we're going to make sure we can actually access this HTML file in the context of our Express application. So before the app.listen, this is where we're actually going to write our application logic. We are going to firstly have to talk about what endpoints actually are. So endpoints are, you can think of them kind of like an address in an address book. And our application will have a number of addresses, and when we visit those addresses, we'll have a set of code that runs. There are two parts for every address or every endpoint. The first is a method. There are loads of methods, loads of HTTP methods. There are two very common ones. The first is a GET request. And when you're visiting pages in the browser and you're going to URLs, they're endpoints. They're GET requests. They're going off somewhere and data's coming back. They're GET endpoints. And then there's POST requests, POST endpoints. And that is generally what we use when we are sending data to the server. There are a few other methods which involve sending data to, which do slightly different things. But right now we're just going to use GET and we're going to use POST. Now, in order to serve this index.html in our Express application, we're going to use a GET request. To create an endpoint, we go app dot and then our method. So app.get, and this takes two arguments, two parameters. The first is a string denoting where the address is. The default, the kind of home page, if you will, is just a /. The second argument is a function. This function is a function that will run once we visit this endpoint. There are two parameters for this function. The first is called request, and the second is called response. Remember, you can call these whatever you want, and if you change the name of these though, like quite often people will write rec and res because it's a little shorter. We'll go for the full word so it's easier to follow. Just remember that every time I write request inside of this function, you should swap it out for the name of your argument. Then we're going to do two squiggly brackets. So this is the code that will run. I think the first thing we should do is just console.log get request to /, just so we know that it's working, and I'll show you where this will log in a moment. And then we are actually going to send our file to, we'll send our file back to the browser, so our index.html file. So to do this, we form a response. We're going to send a file. The first part of this is a string called dir name, directory name. You don't need to worry too much about this, but it's convention in Express that this refers to the exact folder that index.js is in. So dir name, and we're going to add to that /views, because it's in the views folder, /index.html. Okay, let's restart our Node application. Just a note, when it's running, if you want it to end, you can click Control-C. So I did that by default without explaining it, but you can click Control-C to end your program, then you can restart it. Let's go over to our browser. Oh, brilliant, there's my API key and secret. Brilliant, I will delete that application. You know what? I'm going to go delete that application now and just recreate it, get those keys back. So I'm going to go do that. I think that's probably best practice when you have butterfingers like me. How's everyone doing, by the way, while I do this? It'll just take me a moment. But how's everyone doing today? You know what? Let's just call a break for a moment. I would love to know, I plan to ask on every one of these streams what cool things you've been working on this week. It doesn't have to be code. Might be a blog post you've written. Might be I got to the stage of lockdown where I'm doing home improvements, so it could be a home improvements thing. But tell me, what cool things have you got on with this week? Can I see the index.html file again? You can see it in just a moment once I have got new keys in place. Just bear with me. But yes, of course you can see it again. Thank you for asking. I built this week a version of this project actually, which ran on Netlify, which I quite enjoyed. There will be a blog post about that soon. It's kind of like a next step for this. I think I've got everything in place. I've killed the old API key and secret. Let's maybe not have that open anymore. Right, let's look at index.html. Let's remove our secrets. Okay, cool. This is our index.html file. What I'm going to do, because I don't want to spend too long on this, is I'm actually just going to dump this code right in the chat. I will leave it up if you really do want to copy and paste it for just a couple more minutes, while people let me know what cool things they've been doing for the last week. But you are also welcome to copy and paste that. Yeah, you're also welcome to copy and paste that. I'll give you another few in order to do that. working on a program to take an irregular expression and output a more human, readable description of the matcher as a string in English. That is really cool. Regexes still scare me quite a lot, and almost every time I refer back to a tool on the internet. So when it's done, send it to me, because it will probably be yours next time. Doing a Swift UI app using OpenTalk, that's brilliant. Swift is something that is in a bucket list somewhere. You know, there's that huge list of things that you want to learn and you want to use. Yeah, cool. Swift UI is the Apple framework that kind of builds common components for you, right? And you can kind of boilerplate apps a bit easier. I'm going to move on from here. Yes, you have the code in the chat. If you need to see it again, stop me, because I want you to be able to follow along. So we've restarted our Node.js application. We're going to go back to our browser. That's right, that's where we were at, but I'm not going to be showing you my key and secret this time. And we are going to visit localhost 3000. And this is our page. This is the page that we built. It's an H1, a label, an input, and a button. And we'll see over here that it says get request slash, which is a piece of code that we had run every single time that we hit this endpoint. So if you are with me, congratulations, we are getting along quite well. Let's build the session page as well. It's also going to be a basic HTML page. In the interest of time, I'm going to build it, I'll talk you through it, and then I'm going to pop the HTML code in the chat so we can move on with writing some JavaScript. So let's build the session.html page. It's mostly going to look the same. We have an HTML, we have an empty head, we have a body. Now in here, there's going to just be a couple more things. We're going to put an H1 to say session, so you can tell that this is the page with the session. We are going to create two divs. The first div will just have an ID of subscriber, nothing in it. And then we will have one called publisher. Now remember, we spoke about this earlier. The publisher is your video being published up to the OpenTalk cloud. And every subscriber are people who are seeing your stream. So subscriber in this context will be everybody else's stream. You don't need to worry too much about this, but this is our very, very basic HTML. Oh, that's awesome. Yes, thank you. Someone played a little chess application that I built and demoed in one of my colleagues' streams. Michael, he runs a stream on every other Friday where I'm not running a stream, so his will be next week, called the Late Night Build. And I demoed a chess application in that, and I made Swift Chef embrace their JavaScript side. This is the HTML for the session page. So let's do exactly the same again in order to actually serve up this page. Ooh. So we're going to copy and paste that because it is mostly the same. There are going to be a few changes we make. Firstly, the actual endpoint itself. So this endpoint we will do at /session/:name. You may be asking yourself what this colon is. You don't see this in URLs. Express uses this to mean a dynamic route. So this would be run if someone visited /session/hello, if someone visited /session/Kevin, and so on. It means that this portion of it is dynamic, can change, and we are referring to it as the name. So we're going to do that. We should probably change the console.log. So we're going to say get request to /session/. Now let's talk about how we actually get that value name into our function. So I'm going to add it because it is a string, and it is available at request.params or parameters, params, dot, and then the name of it. So dot name. If I called this dot, I don't know, dot room, that'd be fine too. We would just call it room here, but I'm going to call it name. And then finally, we're going to actually be serving up the session page. So let's just recap what we're doing here. Let's recap what we're doing here. So we have a GET request for just localhost 3000. And when you hit that, we'll do this console log and we'll send the index page. And when you go to /session/anything, we will console log it and we can access the value of what comes after that slash in request.params.name. And we send over the session. I'm going to go over to the browser, just going to test that works. We're actually going to restart the server first as is necessary. And we're going to go over here. So localhost 3000 /session/hello. There we are, and we've loaded this session. Remember, those two divs we created are currently empty, so don't worry if this is all you see. This is correct. And we'll see here, get request to slash. I struggle with the word slash. I'm not sure if you noticed. /session/hello. Great, so they are our routes. Now there's one final thing we're going to do before we get into the OpenTalk part of this code, and it is actually establish a link between these two pages. How does a user go from slash to /session/hello? We're going to write a little bit of JavaScript here in order to make that happen. Now we can do that by creating a script tag just before this end body tag. So after the end form, we're going to write script. And inside of here, we can write some JavaScript. And this JavaScript will run in the browser. So let's talk about what we're going to do, then let's do it. We're going to watch for when this form is submitted. Now the default browser behavior is that it will automatically refresh the page, or it will go to the page that is here and send some data. We're not going to do that. So it will automatically refresh the page. We want to stop that because we want to run some subsequent JavaScript. So we're going to stop it refreshing, and then we're just going to tell the browser, hey, manually go to /session/ and then whatever the value is of this input. So let's do that. The first thing we need to do is actually identify this form in our JavaScript. So I'm going to create a new variable called form, and this is going to be equal to the value of document.getElement by ID, and this, and inside of these brackets is a string, and that string is going to be an ID on the page. So if I wrote name, it would be equal to this input, but we actually want it equal to the form. So registration. And you should only be using IDs on your page once. In fact, I think in the browser it throws a little warning if you use an ID more than once. So this should always refer to only a single element, this form. Then we are going to say when that form is submitted, run some code. To do this, we grab the element, so form dot add event listener. So now we're going to be listening to events that happen on this form. So we add some brackets. And in here, there are two parameters that we're going to pass. The first is the name of an event. Now there are some default browser events. Submit is one that exists for forms. So we're going to add event listener, submit. The second parameter is a function with code that will actually run. And all of the with the code that runs, yes. And it gets passed one argument called event. An event contains all the information about how we submitted that form. It gives you loads of stuff. What's in the field, but also what the behavior is, a whole bunch of stuff. I won't spend too long on it. So first thing we want to do is stop it refreshing. So we can go event.prevent default brackets. So this will stop the default behavior of the form in its tracks immediately. So it won't refresh the page. It won't direct us anywhere. It won't do anything funky. And then we're going to tell it manually where to go. To do that, we can update the location.pathname. And in fact, this is probably the point where I'm going to show you how this works. So I right-clicked on this page and hit inspect. I'm going to go over to the console, and I'm going to just make this text way, way, way bigger. Every single page, when you visit it, has this object called a location. It has a ton of properties, and we saw this in our JavaScript primer. And we see this one here, path name. So the path name is /session/hello. So that's here. If I remove this, so now I'm back on that home page and I do location again, you'll see that the path name is just /. Same base URL, so it's still localhost 3000, but the path name is what has changed. So we want to update the path name. So we're going to update the path name. So we're going to take that value in the object and we're going to change the value of it to /session/ and then we want to add to that the value of the text box. To get the value of the text box, we can type in form.elements, elements, that's it. Then the name of this value. So in that case, I believe it is name. And then we want to grab the value. I think the easiest way to do this is let's give it a go. When you're just updating these HTML pages, you don't need to update the server. You don't need to kill it and start it again. When you are changing the index.js file, you do, just as an FYI. You may have noticed I didn't change it. So we're going to go here. We're going to type in hello. You know what? We'll type in something else. Hey. Hit submit. And you see we are now at /session/hey. That is all the front end work we are going to do for now. We now have these two pages. They don't look great. I'll leave that to you. And we can move between them successfully. Now let's go and build the endpoint that will create the data required for the front end to create video. So just to recap here, and I'm going to use, I think I might have shut it. Oh yeah, I'll shut it, it's fine. We're going to need three things. We're going to need the API key, which we already have access to in process.env. We're going to need a session ID, and we're going to need a token. The session ID, if someone is providing the name of the same room, we want to give them the same session ID. Otherwise, when they go to join the video call, there'll be a one-person call because they have different session IDs. And a one-use token. So they're the three things we're going to need to create. I'm just going to minimize this terminal a little so we get a little more code here. So I'm going to write code underneath these two get endpoints. First thing I'm going to do is create an object called sessions. And I'm going to do this in global scope. We're going to use this to keep track of all of the active sessions. In reality, the bad thing about this is every time we restart our node server, we're going to lose this. The value is going to go back to nothing. But for the sake of this workshop, this will be fine. Just if you're going to use this in the real, you'll probably want something a bit more persistent than this object. So we create this object called sessions. And now let's create an endpoint that we can test that we're actually going to use. So we're going to create a post endpoint this time because we're going to receive some data from the user. The value of this, the route will be /session/name. Let's make it the same as the other. We're going to bootstrap this. So request response like so. Once this is the case, we can do all of our special logic in here. And then, and this is the important thing, we respond back with some data. Right now, we are just going to send a string. In fact, you have to return a string. So we're going to return a string. We're just going to say OK, just so we know this is working. So this should now be a working endpoint. If I restart my node server, that will now be there. Now it's time to test it. And I'm going to test it using Postman. No, I said I would try using Postwoman. Let's try this. All right. You can see me testing stuff here. Don't need that anymore. So I'm going to send a post request. So I've gone to postwoman.io. This might not work. There was a little bug the other day, but hopefully it does. We'll see. And if it doesn't later, we'll flip back to Postman. So it's a post request. It's to HTTP localhost 3000 /session/ whatever. It doesn't matter. Hit send. Yeah, network error. But why is there a network error? Let's see if this is something really basic that I'm missing. Oh, maybe let's make this a little smaller so I can actually take it in. Yeah, this is fine. You know what? This is a problem that I will fix. It's not a problem I'm going to fix on the stream because it is not my problem. I'm going to go and open Postman now. So we'll just wait for that to load up. And I'll show you around Postman. Here we are. Show you around Postman. I think I can also bump the size of things in here. I can. Very similar. We pick a method. As you can see, as I said, there are quite a few. Enable proxy. Have I missed something? Right, I'm going back to Postman. Enable proxy. Where? I assume the settings, right? It says try enabling proxy and it worked for me. Turn on the proxy. Leave this okay. We don't want to do that. We hit send. An unknown error occurred whilst the proxy was processing your request. This is interesting. I will try and sort this for next time because I quite like not having to install more tools, but for the sake of this workshop, I am going to use Postman now. So we have our method here, and then we have our full URL here. Hit send, and the response is, there we are. The response is okay. So that means this works successfully. We'll be flipping in and out of Postman throughout, so I might just move it here to the side, just make it a little quicker to get to. There it is. Right. Now we're going to actually do something with this. Now we're going to do something with this. So we're going to include and initialize the OpenTalk client, and we're going to create a new session when someone hits this endpoint. Let's go do that. I'm going to go up to the top where I was requiring things, and I'm going to create a new variable called OpenTalk. Again, you can call it whatever you want. And I'm going to require the OpenTalk library. Now that I have got it in my project, I'm going to initialize it. When you initialize it, you need to provide a couple of pieces of information. Again, you can call this anything you want. In our documentation, we just refer to it with a capital OT. So I'm going to do this so you can hopefully see parallels between this and our documentation if you look again later. So I'm going to create a new instance of OpenTalk. And there are two parameters that I pass in here. The first is our API key, and the second is our API secret. Now, because we put them in .env and there's a require.env.config up here, we should be able to access this with process.env.api key, comma, and then process.env.api secret, like so. And remember that these are strings that are stored inside of .env. So there we are. We've created and initialized the OpenTalk client. Now, back in our post endpoint, now that we have access to that, let's go and create a brand new session. So above this response, so this response.send will be the last line of our function. We'll always do the work above it, and then we'll send whatever it is that we have to show for ourselves. So firstly, let's go and get the name out of this URL. And because we might want to use it a couple of times, I'm actually just going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to create a new variable just to make it a little easier to type. So it's going to be called name, and its value will be whatever this part of the URL is. So we've now got this name. Then we are going to create a new OpenTalk session on the OpenTalk cloud. To do this, we use our client that we've initialized, so ot dot create session, and that's it. We've created a brand new session. However, there's some data that is provided back to us. We want to access it, and so there in here is a parameter we can pass is a callback function, which will contain the information provided back to us from OpenTalk. In order to do this, like before, we write the word function and then some brackets, and this has a couple of arguments. The first is an error, which may be undefined and hopefully is undefined because we don't want errors. And then secondly, is some data. I'm going to call it session. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to console.log session. We can see what comes back. So I'm going to restart the server. I'm going to go to Postman. I'm going to hit send. And we'll see here in our terminal this big object that was returned to us. So there's a bunch of information in there. What we care about is this session ID. That's all we really care about, the session ID. So we really want access to session.session ID. So that is the string we want. Okay, so we've got that. Now we want to store this session in our sessions object, so it exists outside of this function. And we're also going to want to store with it a friendly name. The way we're going to do this is we are going to create a set of key properties and values that look like this. So we create one called hey, and then in here is going to be the associated session ID. Oh, session ID. Then we want one called, I don't know, hi. We want its session ID. So that's how we're going to store them. There are loads of ways to store this. You could store it in an array of objects. This is how we're going to do it in our application though. So I'm going to delete these. And what we're going to do is push the session ID and the name into the sessions object. This is how we're going to do it. We are going to say sessions name, because remember, this is a dynamic object property. So this is equal to whatever is in this variable. And the value to that will be, the value in that will be session.session ID. And then that should be pushed in there. Now that we've got this in session, let's change our response. Remember I said it needs to be a string? We actually want to provide an object back because the object will have a few values in it. In order to do this, we are going to use the following code. JSON.stringify and some brackets. Now inside of here, we can put an object of JSON. And when it actually gets sent, it will be a string. So this is just convention. So this is going to be an object, like so. So we are going to provide the session ID in return. So the session ID will be in sessions with this name. And we also need to send back the API key. So this is in process.env.api key. Sharing your API key isn't really a huge issue. I would still dissuade you from it. It's the API secret you want to keep, well, secret. Right, let's see what happens here. We're going to start our server again. We're going to go to session/hey. Oh, this is empty. Why is it empty? Okay, let's take a look. It is empty, yes, /session/hey. We pull out the name, sessions name. This is a bug. Well, we do have this error. So let's go ahead and say if there's an error, let's console.log the error. Let's see if this provides us anything more fruitful. No, okay. What am I missing here? Stream, if you see anything, by all means tell me. JSON.string if I. Oh, I think Express might do this step for you. I think I'm making this more difficult than it needs to be. I think it does turn it into a string. I don't think we need to do that. No, of course not. That would be too easy. Well, firstly, it's not process.env.api, it's underscore this API key like that. I mistyped it. So let's restart that and at least see if we get that property in response. Okay, we get the API key back. Great. That means the issue is in this. So we have a name come back. We create a new session. We know we get the session back because we logged it to our console. Yep. SEMA API key. Got that one. Now it's the other one. Why? We have a session.session ID. Why don't we just console.log session.session ID. Restart the server. Try that again. Okay, we've got it. And then we are assigning sessions. I got session not defined. Ooh, interesting. You got session not defined. Remember that this value session is only available between these squiggly brackets. So if you're using the word session, it has to be within here. So just check you've got this line in the right place. And down here, you can use sessions, plural, because this is a global variable. So it sounds like that might be your specific issue, but I've not got a session not defined. So I'm wondering why. Okay, you know what we'll do down here? Let's just console.log all of sessions, all of it, every single session that exists, which at this point should be just the one. Oh, look, it's an empty object. This line is the problem where we are storing it. So let's take a look at this. Sessions name equals session dot session ID. Very curious. Let's console.log sessions name. Look, it is coming out. It is coming out. Why? Very curious indeed. Wonder why. Oh, session.session ID. And then session name was indeed equal. You know what? I didn't restart the server when I did that last test. So let's work through this together. Right, restart the server this time, Kevin. Try hitting the endpoint again. Oh no, look, it is happening. So session's name is equal to that. I know why the issue is occurring. Sometimes creating a session takes a second or two. And JavaScript doesn't wait. JavaScript will just go on to the next step in the instruction. So even though we are assigning session's name to the session's ID, that's all fine and dandy, brilliant, but we might have skipped over to this step before it's finished making the session. So what we're going to do for now is we're going to take this response.send. I'm going to remove these console.logs. And we're going to pop it inside of this code block, like so. Okay? So I took that response.send from down here and I moved it inside of this function. I'm going to restart my server. Try that again. There we go. Brilliant. We now have a session ID being returned and we have an API key being returned. Now there's that final part. Oh no, there's not a final part because right now we're creating a new session every single time. So the way we're going to do this, actually, I am going to console.log. The sessions, all of it, just so you can see what's happening here. So if I go to here and I hit send, in fact, you can see it right here inside the Postman. That's our session ID for hey. Brilliant. Hit it again and you'll notice it very subtly changed. These are not the same session IDs because it's generating a new session every single time. This is no fun because it's the session ID that tells the browser which session to connect to. So even though we both think we're connecting to the hey session, we're actually going into different rooms all by ourselves. So what we want to do is, so what we want to do is only create a new session if a session doesn't already exist. And if it does, we want to just give you the information for the existing session. So I'm actually going to turn this terminal on and off when we need it, just to give us, again, a bit more space to code. So we grab the name. We're going to need that in both cases. And let's check if it already exists. So we're going to check if sessions.name exists. And remember, if it exists, it has a truthy value. And if it doesn't exist, its value is known as undefined. And that was one of our falsy values. So this is us checking if it exists. If it does exist, we will, well, we don't actually need to do anything fancy here. We're just going to go response.send. And we're going to go session ID is equal to the existing value of sessions.name, and we'll send you the API key. Wonderful. And we're going to flip our brackets the right way around. Got real butterfingers today. If a session doesn't exist, that's the dog. If the session doesn't exist, then we're going to create a new one and send that information. If I save this, restart the server. If we go to hey now, we see there's this string. If we do it again, it should remain the same. But if I go to hello, different room, that's a new key. And the same again. So now we're only creating new OpenTalk sessions when it's a new name that we've not seen or stored before. We can see that down here. I'm going to turn off these console.logs because there's quite a lot. We want the error one, that's useful, but all the others are just kind of for debugging purposes. Great. We've created new sessions. Doggo, do you wanna write some code? You know what? Let's take a pause because we're actually, while it might not feel this way, we are pretty close to being done with this endpoint, and then we've just got to integrate it with the front end. I'm going to take this moment to, what's happened to my captions? God, nothing's going to plan today. Let me get those working again. Right, they should look a bit better now. Yeah. Right, I'm going to take a moment to pause on a day where everything seems to be breaking. And I'm going to tell you that I have recently been listening to some audiobooks, an audiobook series for a book series that I read when I was a teenager. Really, really good fun. I have just come to the end, 13 or 14 books or whatever. Yeah, the dog's not happy. I'm not happy. I have nothing to listen to. I've also finally got up to date with all the podcasts I'm listening to, and I'm going to use this live stream to selfishly ask for some recommendations. So while you take a look at this code, make sure you're up to date, copy it over, and make sure everything looks the same and that it works in Postman as well. I'm going to ask the stream, please give me some audiobook or podcast recommendations. What I would also love, if it's not too much to ask, is tell me a bit about them as well. Last time I asked for some recommendations, they were good recommendations, but I had to go away and search about them. So please help me while I give you a couple of minutes to copy this code. Recommend me a book, recommend me a good audiobook, really. It needs good narration as well, or recommend a good podcast. It can be anything that you enjoy. I need something to listen to on the dog walk. So I'll give you some context while I just give people a moment more to copy this. There's quite a lot of code there. Reply All, amazing podcast. Heavyweight, amazing. Reply All is just a podcast about the internet. Often they talk about like weird quirks that happen on the internet. Heavyweight is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a factual drama, but like the host goes to people and helps them kind of unpack experience in their life. You like Angular podcasts? Is it called Angular podcasts, or is it one in particular? Good technical ones. I quite like Syntax, which is a front-end web development, or a web development generally podcast. That one's pretty good. Google put out a good few podcasts as well. What are you doing? Stop. Doggo really wants in. Doggo likes Angular podcasts too. I'm going to take this moment to jump back into the code. If you're still kind of a little behind, by all means, tell me. We can come back. We can take a look at this together. I'm also going to see if I can placate the dog. We've got a little bit further since you last joined us, mate. We got a little bit further. We've created a session, but only if that session doesn't already exist. Because otherwise people end up in a call all by themselves. What do you think? He's like, Dad, please stop using me as a prop. I am done. What do you think? Not exciting, is it? Not for doggos. So you can go sit down and be quiet. What do you think? It's like, Dad, put me down. I don't like this. All right, there you go. Right. How's the camera doing? The camera seems to be, let's do the, that's what the people do. And it always brings them back into focus, but not for me, because today, hey, there we are. So I was going to be like, today's the day where everything breaks. All right, sweet. Let's crack on then. Right. We've got this. We're returning the session ID. We're returning the API key. There was that third thing we needed, which is we needed a token, and we will need a token in both cases. So we're going to need to write this code in both places. There are some improvements we could make. This code isn't the nicest. It is the most legible and easy for understanding, and it works, which is important. I'll talk to you about some improvements we can make at the end. We'll start up here. So to create a new session, we are going to use our OpenTalk client, so OT, and then we are going to run a method called generate token. And we are going to want to generate a token for our specific session. So we need to pass in a session ID. We already know in this case that the ID exists as this object sessions dot and then the name, so we can pop that in there. The second argument we're going to pass is an object full of options. There are a whole bunch of them we can provide here, but there are going to be two that we are going to provide now. The first is called the role. Now, we spoke a little bit about the role. There are three. There's a publisher, so that's someone who can both share their video and audio and see other people's. There's a subscriber, they can just see other people's, or they can just see the other publishers. And then there's the moderator. The moderator is effectively a publisher, but they also have the ability to kick other people out, so they can force clients to disconnect. For the sake of argument, everyone in this application will be a publisher. The second thing we are going to provide is reference to the name of our session. So we are just going to do this by providing a data object, and the value of this will be room name equals, and then the specific name of this room. So that is how we generate a token. Now we need to actually store it. Just generating it doesn't do much. So we are going to store this in a variable called token, like so. Let's see if this works. Let's try and add it. So we're going to add token, and the value of it will be whatever comes out of this ot.generateToken code. Remember, this will only run if the session already exists. So the first time we should expect not to see it because we'll be creating the session, and the second time we should expect to see it. But for the sake of testing, let's do it. All right, we've created the session, hit send. Now we've got a token. And this token, as I say, includes information about the room name, but also the role. And the role is the important thing there. And we generate a new one of these every time. So every time we hit send, we generate a new token. Great. Now that we know that works, we can copy and paste this code into the other contexts. So we've created a brand new session, we've stored it, then we generate a new token, same as before, and then we're going to return the token. So now we should get a token even if we're only creating the session for the first time. Let's just restart our server, check once more that everything is performing as we expect. Great. We get a session ID, which doesn't change on subsequent requests. We get our API key, which is required by our front end, this part here. And we get our token, which changes every time. We're kind of done with Postman now. I'm going to close it because now we're going to have to make this request from our actual web browser. Let's go and do that. I'm going to just kill Postman there. Here we are. So we've now got this working endpoint. That's fantastic. As I say, let's go update it. We're only going to be working now in this session.html page. And as mentioned before, and as you've seen before, just before the closing body tag, we're going to create a script tag. And this is where we'll be writing JavaScript that runs the moment this page is loaded. So firstly, as I hope you've already, we covered earlier, but I do just want to recap, we can console.log location.pathname. And the value in location.pathname, let's make this bigger. The value is that part of the URL. And this was purposeful to make sure that the GET request and the POST request were the same name, because this is actually the same as, it's the same in both contexts, and we'll be utilizing that. So now that we know we've got the location.pathname, let's go actually call the API. Now browsers have a really cool built-in function called fetch, which we can use to make API calls. The first argument is a URL. We can actually just pass in here location.pathname. Because our application is running on, because our client, the browser part, is on port 3000 and the API is on port 3000, we don't need to provide, localhost 3000 and localhost 3000. We don't need to provide the localhost 3000 part. We can just provide the path name. We can also pass into fetch an object full of options. We're only going to do one option here, and it's to denote this will be a post method. So that means this will go off to our endpoint with the name of this page, so sessions/Kevin's room, and it will be a post request. Once this completes, we can go .then. Once this completes, we will run a function, and we will see what the response is. And we'll just console.log the response. And we see that we get this response, but this body comes in this weird format called a readable stream. And this is a weird thing around fetch. We have to do a tiny bit of work to this to actually grab the data back from our API in a format that we can use. All we need to do in here is return, and this is a common pattern. I wish this step wasn't necessarily required, but unfortunately it is. We are going to return response, or whatever the name of this argument is, .json. And we can chain onto the end of that another function, another callback function. Ooh. With another name. I'm going to call this one data. We'll console.log data. So you kind of just have to chain this middle then statement to turn it into a JSON, to turn the readable stream into JSON. If we go back to the browser now and refresh, that is exactly what we want. The API key, the session ID, and the token. So just to recap, this fetch function has a path name. That's a URL, which in this case is a relative URL. So it's /session/hello, or whatever the name of our session is. That's a post request. We turn it into JSON, and then we can use it. Now that we've done this and we've got our data back, let's actually set up our OpenTalk session in our browser. So we can create a new session. I'm just going to be very literal with this. I'm going to call it a session. And we can go OT. Wait a minute, there's something we're missing here. We don't have access to OT in session.html. OT is an OpenTalk thing. In order to get access to it, we're going to need to go get the Client Sdk for OpenTalk. So let's go back to our browser. And over here on talkbox.com/developer, SDKs web. And if you scroll down, here it is, this script tag. To save you some time, I'm going to put this script tag in the chat for Twitch. So I've got that on my clipboard, back to my code editor. Above this script tag that I'm writing, you can just paste that code in. And that means we now have access to the OpenTalk Client SDK in our browser. Now we have access to OT. That was I'm glad I caught that before I was like, what's going on? So we're going to initialize the session with the data we got back. So OT dot init for initialize session. And there are two pieces of information we need to provide in here. The first is our API key. And that is accessible, as we saw, at data, which is an object, dot API key. The second thing we need to pass it is a session ID. So that was at data.session.id. So now we've initialized this session in our browser. Now remember, we are going to want to kind of package up our camera and audio, they come together, and we want to publish that to this session. In order to do that, we need to create what is known as a publisher object. Fortunately, we can do that in one line of code. We are going to create a new variable called, again, I'll be very literal, I'll call it publisher. And in here, we can go ot.init publisher. So we've initialized the session. Now we're going to create a new publisher. And there is one required argument. And the argument is the ID of the div where it will put the publisher stream. And that is publisher. Remember, it's a string. Publisher. So now we have initialized our brand new publisher. Now we just need to glue the two of them together. We need to take our publisher that we've created and our session that we've initialized, and we want to publish our publisher to the session. And we'll do this as soon as we connect to the session. There's no, you can do this like on a button press. Maybe you want there to be some form of step before people do this, but we'll run this as soon as it's ready. As soon as someone hits this URL, they've hit our API, they've got the data they need back, create the session, create the publisher, and then publish the publisher. Oh, that's a bit of a tongue twister. Say that 10 times quick. So to do this, we can get the session object, and it has a built-in method called .connect. And when we connect to the session, we need to provide our token. Our token was at data.token, because remember, data is an object and it contains API key, session ID, and token. Once we've connected, we can run a function as a callback. So once we've connected successfully to the session, we're going to go ahead and publish the publisher that we created. So if you called this, I don't know, P, you'd be publishing P. So just to be clear, this publisher is this publisher object, and .publish is a method of session. So we've gone ahead and published that. The final thing I said we needed to do was when another person's stream is created in this session, we want to take that stream and we want to put it inside of this subscriber div. So there'll be one for every stream that we have added. To do this, we are going to listen for an event on session. So event.on stream created. And again, there is a callback function. So when the stream is created, we are going to subscribe to this event.stream. And in fact, I believe I missed the word event in here. So this will contain all the information about this stream created event. And I'm going to want to take the stream and subscribe to it. And the second argument is the ID of the div where we want the video to go. In this case, subscriber. Perfect. Let's hit save. Let's see what horrible thing I've broken. Yes. Oh yes, my camera is portrait. I should have thought about this. My camera is portrait, as you can see in the stream. It is physically portrait as well. I'm not cropping it out at the sides, but whatever. This is my video. You can ignore this error here. This is just because we haven't set a nice little icon up here in the tab. We don't care about that. So this is great. This is our publisher. Let's do it again. Yeah. So this is our publisher. This is our subscriber. If other people were to join this session, they would show up above the publisher. For some reason, it's flipped. Don't know why. All right. Let's bring this home and kind of summarize everything that's happened. And in fact, I will go through this by going through that little talk box like tutorial. So there are a few steps of what we did. Firstly, we built an app server that created a new session, initialized a new session, if one doesn't already exist. And the result of that is a session ID that we can store. So that's the first step. The next step is that our front end, our browser tab, calls that API. It not only returns the API key and the session ID, but it creates a brand new one-use token for that version. You only get one video screen. Okay. Do you get one video screen even if you open a new tab? Because I had two tabs open. I'm not sure if you caught that. We'll do troubleshooting in just a moment. I'll recap. That'll give you enough time to type. And then we'll debug any issues with the few minutes we have left. Then, once those three pieces of information are provided back to the client, it can connect directly to the OpenTop cloud. And when a new session is created, we subscribe to it. So that is a recap. Sorry, that's this one. And that is a recap of what we did. And they subscribe to each other through the OpenTop cloud. Okay, right. I've got an oh no in response. Let me help you. What is up? I'll actually open the code back up. Just make sure you've got all of that. I'll hide this so you can see all of it. There we are. So hopefully you can take a look at that. So that's building a basic video application. Thank you for bearing with me through clumsy troubleshooting, but we got there. If I can help anyone, I will stick around for a few minutes. Oh, someone says there's only one stream. This means there is a problem somewhere. So let's recap the code. Then let's maybe comment bits of it out and see. There should be two streams if you have two pages. So we'll take a look at this. Because every instance, every tab is getting a new token. Makes no difference. New tab, new window. Should be fine. So let's just check this out. So we initialize the session. We create a new publisher and we publish it. That's great. That was, if you are seeing one stream, that means you are good on this front. When a new stream is created, like opening a new tab and doing this whole process and publishing your video, in the callback function, which has an argument of event, we will go session.subscribe, two parameters, comma separated. We have event.stream, the stream of information coming, and subscriber. And that has to match, subscriber has to match the ID of this div here. And publisher likewise here. Doggo doesn't know what's wrong either. I'm not going to play with you right now. I'm busy. So this is one tab open. I'm going to create a new tab, and I see a second video appear. I'm going to just mute one so I can't hear myself. Yeah, I see a new video appear like so. So this one up at the top. Okay, session is not defined at hey 24. This, I don't know why. Uncaught, in promise, reference error, session is not defined. Is this in your browser or is this in your Node.js application down here in the terminal? I'll stick around for a few minutes and try and resolve this. If I don't, session.connect data.token. Let's take a look. Let's work through this together. Data.token function. Publish to publisher. Session.publish publisher. And the issue is that session is not defined. This means this is not the issue. But instead the issue is how we initialize the session. It means that session doesn't exist. So session is the issue. So could you actually take this entire code block here and copy and paste it into the chat, and maybe we can take a look at it together. The issue is almost certainly up here. Doggo has been summoned. Just so you all know, and while I'm just waiting for a response so I can help out, we have a community Slack that I wanted to draw your attention to. You can go to developer.nextmode.com/Slack. That expands here. And a bunch of our team are in here ready to support you if you have issues or if you just want to hang out, have a conversation. It's quite a nice space. So things like this, by all means, bring them to the chat. Okay. So let's take a look at your code. And if we can't get this in a couple of minutes, I will be around in the community Slack to help you. All right. So we created a session. Oh, everyone's helping each other out. This is amazing. Everyone's doing my job for me. I love it. Let's take a look. Yes, in fact, Aglo-Peasant, sorry if I got that horribly wrong. You got it exactly right. The issue here was just that you mistyped one of the sessions. So in yours, you did this. And there's 3 S's there, and there should be 2. So just to be clear, the way that I debugged that was the error said session is not defined. So that tells, I mean, it's right there in the text. The issue isn't with the publisher. The issue is that when we are trying to use a method that belongs to session, it's probably this one here, that session doesn't exist. So there's no .connect, session just doesn't exist. Okay, that seems to have fixed it. Wonderful. Hopefully you'll see in not a lot of code, we can build a pretty competent application. It obviously is not pretty. Let's talk a bit about next steps here. Firstly, you'd probably want some better error handling. In fact, over on our server side, at quite a few points, there are ways of telling if there has been a problem. For example, if there is an error here, you don't just want to console.log the error, but you probably want to send a response to the user that tells them there is an error and then handle it on your front end. At the moment, if there's a problem, they just hit a dead end, and that isn't great user experience. You could also do some lovely styling. One of my colleagues has written a whole set of blog posts I actually based this stream on around making video applications. So in this application, she has made it look much nicer. Let's go down. Yeah, see, look, some lovely CSS there. We have a nicer entry point, a nicer style. So you might want to go and take a look at this. I'll pop it in the chat. And yeah, you might just want to make it look a bit nicer. I didn't want to spend too much time on that during this. There are also some other posts that she has published. So this was adding a basic video chat. Then there's also adding texting functionality, streaming and broadcasting. So that is just one way. So just one way conversation. So very much like you are doing now, watching me. Adding text, sharing your screen. Sharing your screen is quite an interesting one because actually it's very little additional code to add a screen sharing button and have that work successfully. You may also want to add subscriber, as I said, or moderator roles. Moderators, again, have the ability to force certain clients to disconnect from the session. You may want to add text chat. I'm kind of recapping the other blog posts that exist, so by all means, take a look at the chat and the links off of that. Hopefully you found this useful. And thank you for bearing with me to the end. Hopefully you also got to the end. It sounds like a couple of you at least did. This stream is every 2 weeks. And next time we are going to be building an application using the Vonage Voice API. So far we've done one using the messaging API. We've built a Facebook bot. A link to that's on our YouTube channel. There's this one for video, and there'll be voice next time. Again, it will be suitable for beginners. Hopefully my pre-recorded JavaScript segment will work next time and we can get that all captioned and nice. In the meantime, there are some other streams that happen. I'm actually going to show you over on our Twitch channel. Oh, I think this is about to get a bit meta. Let me mute this. There are some other shows that happen. Bi-weekly, there's the developer drop-in with Lorna and Alex, where you can go and have a conversation with them, generally around a theme. There's the low-code hour, again, bi-weekly on Wednesday, where Sam and Yulia look at tools where you write less code and build integrations that way. Every Tuesday, Lauren runs a stream called Lauren Learns Things, where she invites someone on with her and they go through a topic together. There's no experience required, which is this. And then the final one that isn't yet in this schedule is the late night build, which is every other Friday when I'm not running a stream with Michael Jolly. Load of fun. It is, yeah, hopefully you will come to that as well. So if you need help in the meantime, by all means, reach out using the community Slack. My Twitter handle is right above my head. So if you also want specific help, feel free to reach out to me on the community Slack on Twitter, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction.